Hello, I'm Cassandra Patton. Thank you for watching this video. Let me do a little introduction of who I am and why I've chosen to do a YouTube video here today. So, as I said, Cassandra Patton. As you might be able to see some of the pictures behind, I am an Olympic medalist. I won an Olympic bronze in the Beijing Olympics 2008 for the 10 kilometres open water swimming. I've went to numerous world championships, European championships, both in the pool and for open water swimming. Retired in 2011 due to quite a serious shoulder injury. Since then, I've been on poolside and coaching in various forms. I've been director of swimming at a school. I have my own coaching company. So yeah, I've been very heavily involved with swimming since my retirement. And kind of why am I sat here with you watching me today? So on the 24th of February, I got an article pop up on my phone, and the title of it being "Swimmers Ruined by Fat Shaming Coach." Now, instantly that was very emotional. You know, it provoked loads of emotions, and for me, there was two separate things that went through my head. Number one, like, why is this still going on? Like, I've had some experiences with this myself. I'm a big, powerful female. You know, I always was on the scales and being asked to weigh. You know, it really brought home a lot of that emotion. And then it brought home to me this secondary part. Now, I'm a mum. I have two fantastic children who love swimming, and I don't want in 10 years' time for them to come to me and go, "Mummy, I want to join swimming lessons," and me be like, "No, you're not going there. It's going to do more damage than it is good." Now, let's face it, swimming is a fantastic sport. It saves lives, okay? It prevents drowning. It's just fun. You know, you go to the beach, you go in and you have fun. So I really want to be in a position where I feel completely confident to send my children into a swimming club environment, knowing that these issues that have been raised in that BBC documentary have been addressed. Now, I'm just going to kind of get into a little statement, a little opening gambit, as it were, what I've written, because I've taken a lot of time and effort to put this together. I really wanted to do it justice for many reasons. For the swimmers who are brave enough to say this is what's happened to them, and I want, you know, that they want to make a change. I want to make a change. I wanted to make it fair. There are thousands of fantastic coaches with great practice out there. So it was never about pointing fingers, about, you know, shaming coaches. This was just about getting the conversation started. So here is my opening piece. Okay, I have strived to retain the authenticity of the accounts and facts by directly quoting everyone I've interviewed. I want to make it clear that at every opportunity I ask for input from all sides, both positive and negative, from swimmers, coaches, support staff, parents. And although the recollections are subjective, I have endeavoured to gain a rounded knowledge of this subject by reading several respected journals, and I'm going to list them in the description below. So you're going to be able to read them if you want to at the bottom in the description. And I've discussed many of the points that I'm going to talk about today with subject matter experts. I will include some personal recollections. However, I'm going to try my hardest to keep this to a minimum, as I have shared a full account of my experience on the Honest Athlete podcast, which is season 5, episode 8, and it's going to be aired on the 3rd of March 2023. So I'm not a spokesperson from British Swimming or Swim England. I have contacted them for their views on weighing athletes, and all the conclusions that I've made here in this video are my own. So I am open to engage with any agency to provoke change, and I hope that this video will contribute towards that. Okay, so that kind of is the summary of what I've really tried to do. Now, I just want to say that some of the points that we're going to get to, especially when I read some of the accounts, they can be quite triggering. They were incredibly difficult for me to listen to and to read and to interact with people. So if you need further help or information, the two charities I guess I'd push you towards would be the Beat Eating Disorders, and also Mind, which is a fantastic mental health charity. So yeah, I think it's really important that if you feel like you need to get some support and guidance, that you go to that. Okay, so let's dive in, as it were. Let's start at the right beginning. What is weight? Okay, and why has it been used? That's where this whole article surrounded itself, weighing swimmers. Okay, now I'm taking it here from the dictionary. Weight is just the force exerted of the mass of the body by a gravitational field. So that is all that weight is. Okay, it's really important that you understand that. That's all it is. It's the gravity, how much affecting us, and on the scales, that's what you see. So why is it important in swimming? Okay, so this is according to Toussaint, okay, from 2011. And swimming performance depends on the interaction of propulsion and resistive forces. So a swimmer can improve by reducing resistive factors or drag on their body at a given velocity, or by increasing their propulsive forces, so improving their strength, improving their technique. So that's kind of what it is and why it's been so focused on within swimming. Now, when I've been speaking to previous coaches, one of the questions that I had was, you know, what is weight? Why is it important? What is it that makes you feel like it's really important? And some of the answers that I had was, you know, at the time there was no golden answer. There was no, it should be X weight, this is what you should be. It was kind of very much personal preference. It was maybe driven to you. But again, all of these articles that I refer to are in the description box below. You know, one of the things that is important is that this kind of ideal of slim to win, we find it as quite an entrenched ideology within the swimming culture. So it's something that comes up time and time again. It's not just in the UK, it's very much globally. Some of the articles that I'm reading were from Australia, but they are transferable basically word to word from what has been happening, and you know, from my own experience, what happened to me in the past. So it's that kind of ideal, that idea that, you know, if you're a slimmer and you don't have any body fat, then you're going to be faster through the water. And that's the kind of this culture that we've had. Now, I wanted to get to the bottom of that. I didn't feel that having no scientific background or basis was good enough anymore. Now, I have to say, you know, I did retire in 2011. Things are different now than they were then. So I went to the physical performance lead. Now, I just want to say that in this, I've had many people come to me and say, I'm really, really happy for you to name me. You know, I'm happy to put my name out there. But I've also had people say that they don't want to be named. So I have made a point of not naming anybody in this. You will hear that I will refer to their professional titles, but not by their name. Okay, so that's the reason for that. So the physical performance lead from British Swimming, you know, when I asked him this, I was like, this is what happened to me. What's happening now? He was like, it is really, really important that you understand that there is no golden answer to this. There's no appropriate weight. It's very much a scientific trial and error. You know, it's not that, for example, there's no fixed model. So I'm 5'11" and I do 800 free and 10k. So it's not like, okay, at 5'11", doing those events, you need to be 75 kilos. Like, they've really moved away from there. So it's very much about looking at all of the factors that go into performance. So it's about reflecting on past performance. It's about looking at their race plan, their training models. Yes, body metrics fits into that, but it isn't the driving force anymore. You know, it's not the case that you did a PB at 70 kilos, therefore you always need to be 70 kilos to win your race. You know, he was very, very clear on stressing the point that we are educating against that fixed mindset. Okay, it's a science. We're learning all the time. There's so many different elements that go into this. You know, he made it very clear that weight is really erratic. You know, speaking as a female through my menstrual cycle, you know, I can put on a kilo, I can lose a kilo as I go through. So it's not about that weight as a standalone point. Is about looking at the trends and not looking at it in isolation. So for me, that was already fantastic, how we've really moved on and how there is science behind it and it's being backed up. It's not just kind of like a, oh, okay, well, you PB'd at that weight, therefore you're always going to be that weight. You know, I do believe that when I've read some comments on Twitter that people are saying this is really historic and this has happened 10 years ago. Yes, to myself 10 years ago, but there are still people out there that are being weighed. Now, there were coaches that came up to me very, very clear that they did not want to be named. I'm really respecting that. But I want to read just the opening bit from one of the coaches that did contact me. Now it says, as a coach, I'm beginning to feel it is best that we leave things completely alone, like discussing body composition. However, that being said, at the top end of sport, improving multiple areas is very very important, as it can be vital in the pursuit of winning. Now I found this next part of the sentence really important, if that is the goal for the athlete. Now in a minute we're going to discuss the difference between Swim England and British Swimming. This is a coach on a programme, so it is. I really liked that he put that in, because for some swimmers, they're swimming for fun, they're swimming for fitness, they're not necessarily swimming to win. They go on to say it is absolutely not acceptable to point out areas of an athlete's body where they need to be leaner or to call them fat. And they really stress that importance of the communication between the coach and the swimmer. Any coach who thinks it's okay to do so is completely wrong. They go on to say that maybe 10 years ago, this may be seen as acceptable. It wasn't then and it isn't now. However, for asking permission for athletes to monitor their body weight and body composition in the quest of high performance is different. So I want to come back to some of the things that they said in their message to me in a bit. And I want to talk about that 10 years ago and that how it affects and how it lasts. So, swimming and sport in general, and it's not just swimming that this is happening. Sport is an elitist. We're here to win. We're here to be the best that we can be. And sometimes I feel that coaches get so consumed in this want and this drive to make their swimmer better that sometimes they can overlook the ways and the means of doing it. So having that conversation, really thinking about it. Now, I have literally had, they're all over there, they're in a big pile, I'm going to shred them and burn them in a bit, but hundreds, like I say hundreds, probably around 60, so maybe not 100, 60 people contact me, parents and swimmers, and I've had only two coaches email me, and then I've had a Zoom call with another coach as well as a couple of my previous coaches, and I did ask, as I said at the beginning, for positive and negative. There was a bias towards the negative and a huge bias towards female swimmers. I'm going to come on to male in a bit, but I'm going to read this to you. So, I had to swap swimming 3 years ago. Then they go on just to explain a little bit how they've had some mental health issues, which I don't feel it's necessary to share that. So they've had some mental health issues from the swimming that they've had. But from the age of 12, they were weighed weekly, and the weight would be ranked alongside their peers and put into boxed categories as good, okay, and too heavy on the whiteboard. Our names and weights were displayed for everyone to see. Now, this happened to myself. This has happened to people that spoke out in the article. This is has been a very common practice within British swimming, within Swim England. They go on to say they left swimming with a various diagnosis, some of it being PTSD from swimming, and they also have an eating disorder. I have never been able to put on a swimming costume since. I stopped because I can still hear that negative voice in my head that the coaches would say, and they've never been able to look at any of their medals or trophies from that time. They go on to say, I really hope that this helps make a change. So yeah, that was one. Again, this next one I'm going to read is about being weighed on poolside. So their coach started weighing them on poolside. They did 4 morning sessions a week, so they would weighed 4 times a week. And it was in front of everyone. This swimmer developed bulimia and, surprise, surprise, lost lots of weight. They did have, and this is important, that they did say that they did then go on to have the best swim season of their life, but was this because of the increased training or the weight loss? They weren't sure. But the effects have been lifelong. What should have been addressed was their eating habits and how to fuel their body properly rather than just being a number on a scale. Their coach did teach me an incredible amount about healthy lifestyle, but this was after they had lost that initial weight, and in their opinion was worthy of the information and time, which makes me quite sad to think that, you know, that someone has to have lost this weight for them to be deemed worthy, or, you know, these are just the recollections. Okay, so another one here. This swimmer was told so many times, "You look great for a normal girl, but you're not, you're a swimmer." They were made to be weighed on poolside in front of their coach and a group of male swimmers. And at the time, they were a multiple national champion and Commonwealth medalist. And they finished it to be, their finishing line here was "made to feel crap." Okay, so there are others that I've shared on the podcast, so I'm not going to reread those. These are just different ones, and this is the last one that I've got here from the ones that I've printed off. I'm not going to sit here and read them all to you. Trust me, you don't want me to. But the last one here is I think it's great. You're explaining why weight is important, and it's really good that I'm putting it from both sides. But of hindsight and from their experience, I don't think weight should ever be discussed with most children. And that's really interesting they say that, because in Swim England, for example, their remit is from 11 to 18. So in my eyes, very much children who swim rather than the British Swimming, who are performance, who are, I would class them as professional athletes and professional swimmers. So yeah, coming back to that, most children. I often wonder what my life would be like now if I hadn't lost those years to anorexia from my coach's behaviour. And it said that their eating disorder undoubtedly changed the course of my uni years and early 20s. Now, I think it's really important to say that from all the people, I did have one phone call, which was a male swimmer who had a very positive recollection. His view was that his coaches had spoken to him and said, you know, you need to put on weight, you need to put on muscle mass, you need to eat more to be able to be faster in the event you did. So, you know, this is not me just picking all the negative ones and reading them out. This is generally, I've only had one positive recollection. So it was just quite interesting. The people coming forward to me were mainly negative, unfortunately. So if you keep wondering what I'm looking down, I've just got my notes here. You know, I've planned this. This is not just off my brain. I have planned it. So that's what I'm looking down at here. So yeah, I think, you know, reading this, it's very much, it picks up those questions about the mental health. There's a lot here on mental health, eating disorders, and I think it's really important that we kind of go into a little bit of why. Now, I've spoke to a physiologist, been in the sports industry for over 20 years, is now a sports lecturer as well, and we had a conversation about this really high prevalence of mental health issues in swimming. Now, I'm going to read this out to you. I definitely am not clever enough to write this, so I'm definitely quoting this here. So the adaptations in the prefrontal cortex are related to hormone regulation. Okay, so this area of the brain is structurally and functionally vulnerable to environment stresses and sleep distribution during adolescence. So it is responsible for executing functions including emotional regulation, working memory, and self-control. If the stress levels are too high and sleep patterns are disturbed, this has long-term implications on mental health. So the conversation went, you know, when they sent me this and I read it and I questioned them, it's basically that as swimming, we're a sport that we get up really early. You know, you can't just swim once and be a regional swimmer. You have to put in the hours. It's a consistency. You have to do it again and again. But getting up early, you're already putting those stresses onto the adolescent mind, which is already developing, and you know, it's basically in a nutshell that if you are sleep deprived, which swimmers are, there is a long-term disruption that can be lifelong. So if they're dealing with this, as well as the issues of school, the issues of social media, friendships, families, and then they're having a coach who, let's face it, I looked up to every coach I've ever had as some kind of god, because they were facilitating me being able to get faster at the thing I loved the most. You know, and if you're having somebody turn around and say to you, you know what, you need to lose a couple of kilos, or you're carrying a bit of timber there, even though that comment may be from the best place in a performance element, is it going to be even more detrimental to these young minds? So these are just some of the questions that I want you to be thinking about when you're watching this video. It was a really, really interesting conversation, because as a coach, you know, we don't really get taught this. This is not something that we know about, you know, so it's just about trying to raise those little bits and be like, oh, okay, you know what, I might look into that, because I have a whole bunch of swimmers that are teenagers and they are getting up early and I want to make them the best. You know, these are the conversations that I hope this video provokes. Okay, so I said about the male swimmer. So I had the one male swimmer, and the fact that the majority of these are females, and there's a lot more research done into eating disorders and disordered eating in female athletes. Now, I spoke to a researcher who is doing their PhD on eating disorders in male professional athletes. And the conversation that we had was that although the prevalence of full-blown clinical eating disorders in male athletes is quite small, there is a larger amount of disordered eating. And rather than this being weight, so it's not necessarily the number of the scale that goes on to produce this disordered eating, it's more shape comparison. So looking at your own body, then looking at the person next to you and comparing muscle mass, body size, etc. So that is what triggers it mainly in male athletes. So, you know, although it is still really important, there is evidence to say that standing on the scales doesn't tend to have as much of an impact on a male than it does on a female. So it's just putting that out there as well. Okay, so this has been very much centered around weight, weighing people, but I think it actually goes deeper than that. I think some of the conversations and especially some of the accounts, have elements of that power dynamic into it. You know, it's not just about weight, it's about how your coach speaks to your swimmer. And I feel like there has been this expectation that a coach stands on poolside and delivers, and then the swimmer, they just do what they're told, and there's no autonomy for the swimmer, they just get told. And, you know, that raises the question of culture, the culture within swimming, the culture within coachings and swimming clubs. And going back to the eating disorders with the males, the conversation we had that is that they found that a large percentage of when there's problems goes in and is centered in a culture, in a group. So the researcher was doing multi-sport. One of the things that they said was they may be doing working with a martial arts group who all skip in the sauna wearing sweatsuits, or, you know, and they'll do that for half an hour and they won't see there's anything wrong with that because their culture has normalized that. Whereas myself or somebody who's never done that would look at that, be absolutely horrified. So it's about understanding that how a swimming club is, how coaches are, is really fundamental to that, the culture that it brings. So let me read this out to you. Okay, so there's loads of research on here, multiple different journal articles kind of state the same thing. And that risk culture. Now let me unpack that. So risk culture is making decisions that are maybe detrimental to the person. So it could be pushing to a limit where you're going to get injured, or that you're going to be having less energy because you're eating less, having these kind of cultural practices that can be risky to the athlete. So that risk culture promotes injury, both physical and emotional. And it occurs when athletes and cultural insiders, so that is coaches, support staff, you know, parents, people around that, are willing to take, and this is quite important, and accept that risk. Okay, so they might compromise the athlete's health and their well-being in order to get that competitive advantage. Now, I spoke on the phone to a coach earlier this week, and we had a conversation that, you know, some of the things that their coach did to them upset them. They didn't feel it was right at the time, you know, that this is the environment that they had as a swimmer. But now they've stepped onto poolside, and I raised the question of, well, what did you learn from your coach? And they said, you know, quite a bit. And it's about, you know, we are a product of what we learn from. You pick up habits, you pick up little things from your coach. And if you don't question whether that's right or wrong, you will just take that into your coaching. And that's where this area of culture is really, really important. You know, I've got here, there's again multiple references here about the importance to educate coaches against this idea of just recycling coaching practice. It was done then, therefore it's done now, even though it's outdated. Okay, so that kind of raises those questions of, you know, how was it back then and how the change of it now. Now, I have to say that when I spoke to the performance director, he was very adamant that things have moved, you know, massive moved forwards. And you know, I asked him, like, well, you guys are the top. So there's 176,000 swimmers under Swim England. Huge amount of swimmers. The base of the pyramid is massive. Now, British Swimming have 56. So they are people who are going to the, you know, the Olympics, the World Championships. They're kind of tiny tips of the pyramid there. And I asked him, like, you know, what is your job? Like, you guys are the best. You've got the best practices. You've got all the money. And his quote to me was that he feels like it's their job to educate, and this is what's really important, and influence. Okay, so making sure those great practices that we're seeing and that I've heard from that performance lead that I referred to earlier is being filtered down that pyramid to coaches, you know, at your little local club, at your leisure centre. You know, and he goes on to say that he understands that it wasn't perfect in the past, and he agrees that now how their coaching has really changed. Now, with that, I want to go back to my coach A that I spoke about earlier here, and reading some of what he said, because when I read it, it was, for me, I thought it sounded like really good practice and a really respectful way of dealing with their swimmers. Even though they want to get the best performance out of them, of course they do, it's about listening to them and giving them a voice, giving them ownership. Now, so he says here, when he's talking about his swimmers, that he's asked them if they're okay to be monitored in this metric, so to be weighed, in order to reflect back on their performance when it went well and assess body composition in training and in competition periods. So all of the athletes that he mentioned all understood they have multiple different areas that they are being assessed on. For example, freshness, perceived effort, training load, HRV, and they align that with other things to see what is going well, and also to ask them if they're swimming well and if they're happy, putting loads of different, you know, elements into this. And, you know, they go to say that they understand that if an athlete is uncomfortable with any of those metrics, they are not forced to do so, and they have a relationship that is built on trust, and there's okay if they say they don't want to. So that for me is absolutely fantastic. They go on to say the key here is that relationship between athlete, coach, and their kind of practitioner. So they're people who are taking their skinfold, the people that they're working for. So, you know, it's really important that we allow swimmers to understand that this is a metric that assists in performance. It is a tiny little piece of the puzzle. It is not the whole picture, but I feel it's far more important to understand that the athlete's voice, the swimmer's voice, that child, that swimmer's, that voice is so important, and that respect. So we've kind of unpacked a little bit on what it is, why it's been troublesome in the past, you know, where we're going. So I think it's really important now to say where it's going, like what we're doing with it and what's being done in the future. Okay, so the first thing is really important to say is that Swim England have put out guidance that they recommend no athlete, unless they're on a talent pathway, be weighed. So let me read the statement here. It says it is the recommendation from the national governing body that the individuals under the age of 18 should not be weighed unless they are on a national supported pathway. This guidance is applicable to athletes within all of the aquatic disciplines, including swimming, para-swimming, water polo, and artistic swimming and diving. It is designed to prevent potential areas of concern such as physiological distress, which may occur as a result of athletes being tested and monitored in this way. And then they go on to finish saying, Swim England recognises that in the past, coaches may have carried out these tests of this nature. This guidance illustrates our position on this topic now, and therefore does not aim to undermine past practices. And that was released in November 21, so it's been going for a little bit. Now, I spoke to the sports science coordinator for Swim England. Had a really great discussion about this, and they said that they had a camp a couple of weekends ago where they did weigh swimmers. The weights were taken anonymously. They were put into a laptop which had it all completely blanked out. You couldn't see what those weights were, and they were used for helping with their jump tests. So that's what that was used for. The coaches didn't have the data, the swimmers didn't have the data. So that just shows how they are using it. And it's important to say that a coach didn't do it. It was one of their strength and conditioning members of the team that did that. So kind of that's Swim England's side of, you know, their point of view, what they've been saying. Like I said, that British Swimming do use it as a metric, and they do it respectfully within their, you know, that's what they're planning to make sure that they always do it respectfully. So I've had a little read of what Swim England's point of view is there, and that links really nicely to when I had a chat with the physical performance lead of British Swimming. I asked him, you know, like, what are the implications of age group and youth? You know, you've said that you weigh athletes at the top end. Should we continue to weigh them all the way down? And he was like, no, this is not directly appropriate to youth swimmers. So let me just read what they wrote here. So for them, for a youth and an age group swimmer, what's going to really help drive their performance on is their commitment and their consistency to training. Okay, swimming is a physical preparation sport. We have to train lots, let's face it. We have to be in the pool to get better. Now, they said that weight could be used maybe to look at maturation, so when people are hitting puberty, areas like that. However, it should be, the focus on this is really about healthy growth, and that is supported by a good diet and hydration, a good balance of activities, so land-based stuff as well as swimming, and also making those good lifestyle choices, so educating around the importance of sleep, about, you know, being on our phones less. All of those things are going to help with our mental state and therefore help with our performance. So it was really insightful for me to hear that point of view as well. So this is what they're doing at the top. Is that directly, should we directly take that down? No, there's that clear split between the swimmers who would be under Swim England and the swimmers who are under British Swimming. So for me, the last bit that I kind of really wanted to speak to you about was, I've had many people contact me and say that they've tried to complain or they've tried to raise issues and they found it quite difficult to do so. So I had a chat with two of the senior leadership board of Swim England, the Chief Operations Officer and the Sport Development Officer. And on the 8th of March, they're bringing out their Heart of Aquatics plan. So they're basically completely shaking up how they look at safeguarding. They're bringing safeguarding and welfare, and they're kind of combining it. Their team has got bigger. The way that you can bring up queries and report things have changed. So there's a telephone number now that's really prevalent. It's going to be manned. But one of the things that stood out to me from the conversation I had, that their plan is definitely for this year, is to focus on listening. And I think that's really, really important, is to listen, isn't it? And you know, when I've asked them that they're going to be implementing listening groups, so they're teaming up with independent experts, they've kind of said that, you know, this isn't our area of expertise, so we're going to bring on board people to help us with this. and they're really working hard on how are they going to be approachable, like how are they going to set up these listening groups of people to raise any issues, about listening to those past experiences, not belittling, not just saying they're historic therefore they don't matter, and also about listening to people's experiences from now, and then from that they're making those changes going forward. So they're very much kind of excited to see where this is going to go, knowing that a change had to happen, and they're willing to do that, and they've put together, like I said, this Heart of Aquatics plan. So let's kind of finish this. I've been yammering on for 35 minutes. So conclusions. Okay, I'm drawing my conclusions here. Remember, these opinions are all my own from the research that I've done. So these are some of the conclusions that I think needs to go on. Number one is conversation. We've started a conversation. Let's keep this momentum going. Let's keep this rolling. I spoke to a swimmer and they said to me, yeah, my WhatsApp's blowing up. We've got people saying that they're, weighing swimmers is great. Other people saying that weighing swimmers is really bad. And I loved it because they were all discussing it. They were all talking about it. And that to me is utterly fantastic, that they are prepared to say and have those conversations and challenge each other. Because let's face it, those swimmers are going to be the coaches of the future. So if they've had these conversations, then that's going to be in the forefront of their mind going on to when they pick up their stopwatch and they stand on poolside. I think it's great. I think that's one of the key things that I hope continues, is that discussing this and having those conversations. The second thing is about kind of being reflective, getting coaches to ask themselves questions. Now, as an athlete, it's drummed into us from a young age to be reflective. You look at your times, you look at your splits, you look at the video, where can you improve? Now, as coaches, is that conversation as easily or as readily available? Are you willing to say, was that the best I could be? How could I be better in that situation? Did I handle that the best? Do I know, is my knowledge up to scratch in this area? So it's about being reflective and doing that in a safe environment where you can say, actually, you know what, I don't really know much about this. I'm going to be really honest. Like when I started this, I didn't know the difference between an eating disorder and disordered eating. I do now. So therefore my coaching is going to be far better in the future from that, being reflective and learning what I didn't know. Okay, and that links very nicely to the next point, which is education. A coach could qualify in 1999 and be on poolside today without any mandatory, development. Yes, they have to do their safeguarding every 3 years, but actually that's it. Practices have really shifted. Techniques is, the technique that we're promoting has massively shifted, but it's about having that kind of, and I'm going to come back to the word culture, but that culture of striving to be the best that you can be, and do that via education. So the next one here is I think is about, challenging. We as coaches, we challenge our swimmers, we challenge ourselves to be the best that we can be. So it's about having that environment where, this is the key word, respectable challenge. And I'm not just saying rudeness, I'm not just saying that everything that's written on the whiteboard is challenged instantly, but being able to feel safe to say, actually, are we doing the best that we can be? Swimmers learning from their coaches and then becoming coaches themselves. It's about thinking, actually, you know what, I didn't like that then, so I'm not going to directly copy. I'm going to challenge that ideal, I'm going to challenge that culture, and I'm going to make it better for the future for the swimmers that are out there. Finally, I think it's about that mutual respect. And there's this view that kind of swimmers owe their coaches, when I think about it, I feel like I owe my coach for helping me win my Olympic medal. Now, it's no disrespect to them to say I could have won that Olympic medal with somebody else. But, sometimes I feel like the respect sometimes can be one way, where the swimmers really respect their coaches, but the coaches don't always. And I'm not saying this is the case everywhere. Of course it's not. But it's just having that mutual two-way respect. Now, finally, it's great having strategies, and it's great putting down guidance, but actually guidance is only as good as the paper it's printed on if the culture follows it if the culture remains the same, then you might as well just not even print that guidance off. So yeah, I really think that the next steps from this would be to really address the culture and you know, and accept that we've got fantastic coaches. This isn't a battering for all the coaches out there, of course it's not, but it's just about making sure those ones that are maybe not performing or not interacting with the swimmers the way they should do are then brought up to the level that is expected. Now, as I said before, these were my own opinions that I've drawn from this, and I'm happy to work with any agency, and I hope I've been really fair to say that people have been really hurt and people are still really hurting from this. So like this conversation hopefully as a starting point to making sure that we don't ever get to a position where people are feeling like that again. Yeah, so that's my video. I'm sure I'll do another one in a couple of months' time and maybe another one in another year's time, but that's the end of this one for today. Thank you so much for watching.